This is a tutorial for the Photoshop exercise called Welcome to the Jungle, and here is an example of the kind of thing you'll be making. So it's pretty much a collage combining several images to create a composite or a collage, this kind of green, jungly looking image. So start off in Moodle under the Photoshop tab and Photoshop exercises. Scroll down till you find Welcome to the Jungle, and then download this resource images folder. And then this file is the example that I just showed you, this file. So download the resource images, and you might need to unzip it depending if you're on a Mac or a PC. And inside this folder there are two more folders, and we're going to start with the background greenery folder. So these images are just big leafy photos, and we're going to use these to create the background of our collage first. I've just hit the space bar on the Mac to bring up this preview, and then using the arrow keys to flick through the folder. I might start with this one. So to start, we're going to open up Photoshop and create a new file. I'm going to make this A4 size, so 29.7 centimeters. Make sure this is on the right unit that you want, so centimeters or millimeters. So in millimeters it would be 297, and in centimeters it's 29.7, and the height is 21 centimeters or 210 mil. You could do a portrait one if you wanted to, up to you, doesn't really matter. And the resolution I'm going to keep is 300, or I'm going to, if it's not, doesn't say 300 in yours, make sure it says 300. Sometimes it's nice to do things at double the resolution that you might want, so you could do this at 600 ppi. Make sure this is on pixels per inch. But for the sake of this exercise, 300 will be dandy. I'm going to leave the color mode on RGB. Controversial, I know, considering we'll probably be printing this, but I like to design in RGB, and then if I need to convert to CMYK later, which there's an option here for CMYK, I could. Similar to like the resolution, you might want to start in 600 ppi rather than 300. I feel the same way about the color mode, so I'll stay in RGB and then convert it later if I need to, because RGB is a bigger color gamut than CMYK. And especially for greens, you'll get more vibrant greens with RGB. All right, don't worry about the rest of it, and then click Create. And then we've got our A4 canvas. So next, pick the photo that you want to put into this file. We're going to choose maybe 3 or 4 background images. So I'm going to start with this one, and I'm going to click and drag and drop it onto my canvas. So make sure you've got your window set up so you can see the Photoshop is open in the background and your image folder kind of on top and easily in a position that's easy to drag it over. Another option, I'll just undo that, is to go into File, Place Embedded. In this situation, we're going to place embedded. Place linked is also a nice option, but for what we're doing, place embedded is good. And then you could find your images in here. I'm just going to drag it over. And then you'll see this comes in with this blue cross and blue outline. That means it's in transform mode, and you can't really do anything else while it's in free transform. So everything's kind of grayed out. It's because it's in this like preview mode for the transform. So you can drag this around, just click and drag. You can resize by dragging the corner. Photoshop is a little bit different to Illustrator and InDesign. It does the opposite. So usually, like with the shift. So usually in Illustrator or InDesign, you have to hold the shift key to keep the image in proportion. If I hold the shift key now, it goes out of proportion. So don't worry about holding the shift. If you just drag it, I think it does the same, from the side too, it keeps it in proportion automatically, which is very confusing when your muscle memory is to hold the shift all the time. But anyway, Adobe trying to confuse us again. All right, so I'm going to size this however I like. It's okay if the image goes off the edge because you'll only be able to see whatever's on your canvas, and it won't delete anything that's past the edge of your canvas. If you see, I can still drag that back on if I wanted to add it in later. You can also use the arrow keys. I'm going to use the arrow keys to like move this around too. And then when you're all done with the position, hit return. So now you can see we've got our background layer and this image that we've placed in. So I'm going to choose the next photo. Let's go with this one. So click and drag it around till it's in a spot that I'm happy with. I'm going to move it down a little bit and hit enter to place that in place. One more. Let's go with this one. I wonder if you can hear those sirens in the background. It's a fire truck coming around. Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't explain what I just did then. So you can rotate it too. So in the corner, if you drag just past the corner, you get that double-ended arrow. When you click and drag on that, you can rotate as well. If you hit enter and then decide, oh, I actually want to resize this or change it somehow, that option is under Edit Free Transform, or the shortcut is Command T, or on a PC it would be Control T, and that puts it back into that free transform mode, and then you can resize, rotate, drag around, whatever you want to do. Right, I'm going to hit enter, and now you can see it automatically puts each image on its own layer when you drag them in like that. And I'm going to rearrange these a bit. So I'm going to drag this one on top so it comes in front of this one. So now we've got our 3 background images, and you want to overlap them a bit. Don't have them just touching, because we're going to remove parts of these images so they don't look so harsh and joined together. So we're going to blend them a bit. And you want to have something underneath when you're removing part of that image. Otherwise you'll end up with white areas. Cool. So for that, I'm going to create a layer mask. So on all 3 of the image layers, I'm going to select Create Layer Mask, which is that rectangle with the circle inside it at the bottom of the Layers palette. Click that, and now that adds your layer mask. Remember from the last exercise, we did some layer masking. Cool. And then I'm going to start with this image. If you're confused or you're not sure which one it is, just use the visibility, turn it on and off. Or I think if you are on the move tool, if you kind of click on it generally, Photoshop will select it for you. So you can see there, as I'm clicking on different areas, it's selecting different layers. Okay, so I want this one. And make sure you've got the layer mask selected. When you're clicking around like this on the image, it does select the thumbnail. And in which case, if I went to use the brush tool, like you would to start impacting the layer mask, and then went to do something on the image, it has that cross. And if I click, it comes up with this error message, and it says, this smart object must be rasterized, blah, 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 blah. Rasterize the smart object. No, do not rasterize the smart object, please, please. I'll explain a bit about smart objects and the difference. So if you get this error message, I know it's tempting just to be like, what, whatever, yeah, okay. It will rasterize this layer, which they are raster images. It's a little bit confusing to try and explain the difference, but it pretty much is going to make it not a smart object, and for this we want it to be, and I'll explain why. So if you get this pop up, hit cancel, don't hit OK, it's not okay. So in the thumbnail, in the layers panel, the little thumbnails, you'll see in the corner it's got this little kind of page icon thing in the bottom corner that's indicating it's a smart object. And actually when I just rolled over it says smart object. If I did hit OK on this, see how that removes that icon? That means it's now like a regular layer, like a pixel layer. It just says layer thumbnail. So you can, there is a way to like, so if I right click on here, you can convert it back to a smart object. When you do that, see how the mask, it looks like it disappears. It doesn't, it's just merged the mask in with this. And if you double click on it, then it will open up the smart object. A smart object is pretty much an image inside an image. So it's like an image inside your Photoshop file. So inside this layer is this smart object, and I can double click on that and it will open separately, and then I can play around with the smart object kind of separately. So that's where the layer mask went to. So if you accidentally rasterize this layer and then you put it back into a smart object and you want to change your layer mask, you have to double click on it and affect it here. Which is okay, you can do that, but it might be a bit confusing when you're a beginner and you're looking at your layers here going, where is my layer mask? So it's going to undo that. The best way is if it ever asks you to rasterize, just say no. Just say no, kids. It's okay. But like I say, it's not the end of the world. You can convert it back. So why do we want this to be a smart object? Let me tell you why. So if I select this image and hit the free transform and I'm scaling this really tiny, I can hit return on that, apply it, and then I decide, oh, actually, no, I want this to be really big again. I can go to edit, free transform, scale this up. It's not going to lose any quality. It'll keep its quality. If I'm just going to undo that so it's back to where it was before. Oh, if it's going to let me. If it's rasterized, when you scale it down, I'll just duplicate this and rasterize layer. Go into free transform. And then if I resize this, make it very, very tiny, move it over here so you can see it, and then decide to size it up again, it loses its quality because it's resizing from when I made it small. It's not remembering how it started life. See up here it says 400%. That's because it's 400% from when it was small, from when I just resized it. So smart object will kind of remember where it came from, whereas a non-smart object, dumb object, won't, and it will just resize from the pixels it has at the time. So that's the main difference. You can also, I'm just going to place that so it can be in the file. Oh, actually that quality looks pretty good. What a bad demonstration. Oh wait, no, it's okay. See the difference? See how that doesn't look so great, and then this one's really crisp. So the other thing is smart filters. So they're a little bit similar to adjustment layers, which we've talked about. Like down here, the circle, these are the adjustment layers. With a smart object, so the main perk of adjustment layers is they're non-destructive, which means you're not permanently changing the image or the pixels of the images in your file. And adjustment layers, don't change that. The way to do it destructively is go to image, adjustments, and then choose your adjustment from this menu. If you did that to a rasterized layer or a regular image, it would permanently change that file. Not permanently, but it's hard to go back and edit it. So for example, the saturation's a really easy example to show you. So if I turn the saturation down to make this image black and white, this is the smart object version, it puts a smart filter on this layer. And you can see here it says hue saturation. It tells me the adjustment I made. And then if I decide later I want to alter that or change it back, you can see the saturation, it shows, oh yeah, you changed this to -100, and I can change that back. It remembers the information. It should just be like a memorable layer, a memory layer, rather than a smart, or a memory object or a smart object, because it remembers everything. So you can change the saturation. You can edit it. It's editable, or I think they call it live. It's a live object, so it's easy to go back and change things. if I do that to the one that was rasterized, this one on the left, if I go into image adjustment, hue saturation, and take that saturation so it becomes black and white. If I decide now, actually I want that to be color again, if I go back to image adjustments, saturation, see how the saturation's gone back to 0? It kind of forgets. It just goes back to default. And now if I up the saturation, it's not going to add any color because it's starting from this point where it's at now, not from where it came from. So it's affecting this black and white image now, not the original colored image that we've taken in. So I can't add that color back in now. It's permanently changed this image. It's destructive. Okay, so that's another nice thing about smart objects is smart filters. There is a video on the Moodle in the resources talking a bit more about smart objects. It's like a minute long. It pretty much just says what I just said. But if you want a little extra info on that, you can go and watch that video. So let's start with our masking. I'm just going to undo all the things. Okay, so let's start with this one. Select the layer mask. Make sure these little white corners are on your layer mask, this white rectangle. Then I'm going into the brush tool, and then I'm checking that my foreground color is black, remembering that anything that you paint on the layer mask in black will remove that part of the image, and anything in white adds. My brush size is 250. You can resize that here if you like, or you can change the hardness as well, or you can change the hardness as well. The keyboard shortcut for the brush size is next to the P. There's 2 square brackets, so the bracket on the right makes it bigger and the bracket on the left makes it smaller. And I'm always changing those as I go, so I really like using the keyboard shortcut for that. Also actually let's do this and then I'll talk more. So let's zoom in a bit. And I'm just taking out, I'm going to clip this so that I can see like to the edge of this leaf. You don't have to, that's just what I'm choosing to do, to go like follow the shape of this image a bit. If you're finding the background layer a bit distracting, you can turn it off over here in your layers panel, just turn the visibility eyeball off, and then you'll just see the white background. And then let's quickly just scrub out some of this background. I'm being way rough because my brush is really big, and then I'm going to zoom in, make my brush smaller, and go around a bit more detailed on this edge. You don't have to be super detailed because you're layering the images. It's not super obvious if you left a bit of the background in here. You can also make your brush a bit softer, so you bring the hardness down. That'll make it more feathered. And I'm just going to do a really quick job of this. I'm clicking and dragging with this brush tool. But you can spend as long as you like on this. I'm going to see how there's like edge of the image. I don't want that in there, so I'm just going to like soften that a bit. Make my brush a bit smaller, get into this little corner. Sometimes it's nice to trace around the edge of what you want to keep first, and then like with a smaller, more detailed brush, and then make the brush bigger to take out these bits depending on the area that you're working on. A bit like when you're colouring in a colouring book and you kind of trace around the edge and then colouring the big bits. So I'm making my brush really big so that I can make this edge really soft. Going here, again, I'm just going to really quickly do this. You can be more detailed when you're working on yours. Okay, Command 0 to fit everything on the page. I'm going to soften that edge a bit. Bring that in. It's like you're just painting. Okay, let's turn these layers back on so I can see where we're at. Sweet, so now you can see there's a bit of a white area behind. Let's fill that in with this image. So edit, free transform, and then I'm going to make this bigger. And you always double check if you're making this too big, look at the top and see what the percentage is. So all these images I've saved is 300 dpi for you. So If you go bigger than that, you're going to lower the resolution of this image. 135 is okay. You can probably go up to 150 without causing too many dramas. But you wouldn't want to go into like 200, 300, 400. You're gonna end up with a pixelated image. Right, hit enter, apply that, and then let's go to the second layer. Make sure you're on the layer mask. Brush tool still selected from before, and then I'm going to make sure the black is the foreground color. And this one, I'm just going to, maybe I'll do a bit of an arc. If you end up removing a part that you want to add back, switch around your foreground and background colors. You can use the arrow, there's a double-ended arrow here, or hit the X on your keyboard. We'll swap them around. That's a nice shortcut. If you don't have black and white, hit D on your keyboard, and that will set the foreground and background to your default setting, which is what it is. So I'll just show an example. If I make my foreground color like red, which it won't do because I'm on a layer mask, it looks grey. Okay, when I'm on an image, I let me pick a color. Oh, it's magenta. And then I want it to be black and white. I hit D. See how I just hit D on the keyboard. That sets this as black and white in the foreground and background. So make sure I'm on the layer mask again. I'm going to hit D and then X, so I've got the black in front. Oops, not that much. Great, so do something like that for your background. You can go as funky as you like or as simple as you like. You can trace around leaves like I've done here, or you can just soften the edges, whatever you like to do. So next I'm going to add, let's save our file. How about we save this? So I'm going to go save as and choose a place to save it. I'm going to pop it in the downloads folder. I'm going to call this Welcome to the Jungle and pop my name on the end, which I'm sure you're doing with all your files, right? Chuck your name on it, then you know I worked on this or I made this. And then if it's anything that you need to supply to me, I'll know you made it. Great, click OK on that, don't worry about that. It's saved as a Photoshop file. Didn't explain that when I was doing it. I'll show you again quickly. Save as, pick a spot. The format it'll default to Photoshop because we've created layers. And a Photoshop file or a PSD supports layers. There are other file types, like I think a TIFF and the PDF will support layers, but let's just keep it as a Photoshop file for now. Okay, save. I've already saved it. I can cancel it. Okay, I'm going to quickly organize these layers before I do the next part. So this little folder in the layers panel, if you click on that, it'll create a group. I'm going to drag it to the top. I'm going to double click on that and call it background. If I could spell background, greenery. Hit enter. And then select all the layers I've been working on, drag them into that folder. It was really subtle, but it did pop it into that folder. Just shifted them over a little bit. If I hit this arrow, it will condense it, and then you can see all my layers are in that folder. Leave the background out. It doesn't need to be in there. So you should have a background layer, and then this folder could background greenery. And then when you hit the arrow, it expands out. You can see everything. And then the next bits we're going to add, we'll put them in their own folder. And you don't have to do that. It's just a bit easier sometimes if you want to quickly turn off the whole background at once. This is a nice way to be able to do that. And if your layers panel is getting a bit hectic with a lot of different images, you can just condense it and then work on whatever you're working on. Okie dokie, next. So we're going to go into the other folder, plants to remove background, and pick a few of these. So I'm going to start with the Monstera. It's a nice beginner, user-friendly one. If I can find it, there it is. This one. Start with this one. So if you can open up that file, it's the one that has Dominica in it. Again, all these images are from Pexels, same as the last exercise. Pexels is a royalty-free stock photo fabulous website. So don't click and drag this one in. We don't want to add it to this file. We want to open it separately. So you can click and drag it into the icon here. We'll open it as its own image, or right click. Try again. Right click, open with Photoshop. And the reason I'm saying to right click and not double click is if you double click it, it might open in a different program. It might open in Photoshop, depends what your settings are. But for me, I've got Photoshop set as a default. You might have it as preview or image viewer or whatever other program. If you right click, choose Photoshop, we know it's going to open in Photoshop. Cool, so now you can see this is open separately. We've got our original file, or the one we were just working on, and now it's a separate file. Our image, we're going to remove the background of this. So let me talk about some selection tools. So incidentally, my lasso tool is selected. Oh, actually, let's start with this, marquee tool. So underneath the move tool is the marquee tool. And this is for creating selections that are rectangular shaped. If you hold the shift, it'll make it a square. So if you wanted to select something that had nice straight edges like this, this would be a good choice. You can long hold or right click on there to see some other options like elliptical marquee. So I'm just going to deselect what's there. Oh, it won't let me. If I just start drawing it, we'll just do it anyway. So this is like a circle one or an oval. If you hold the shift, it will put it into a perfect circle. So if you have something with a circle, this would be really nice. Not super appropriate for what we're doing. We're doing a bit odd shaped, in which case you could use the lasso tool. So the lasso tool is a little bit similar, like it works a little bit similarly to the pencil tool in Illustrator, in that wherever you click and drag is where it's going to not draw. This is creating a selection, but that line is purely because it's wherever I'm putting my mouse, right? And for this, if I just let go here, it joins back to where it started. So when you're using the lasso tool, you want to it's not easy for this because you've got to hold down the mouse the whole time. Like you'd have to trace around the whole thing, be very precise, mostly precise, and then go all the way around and then go back to where you started to create this shape. Okay, so that's a little bit tricky for this. Great for other stuff, tricky in this case. Underneath the lasso tool, as in right click or long hold to get more options, it's a polygon lasso tool, which is kind of similar to the pen tool in the way that you just click and let go, click and let go, click and let go. It's not drawing a line, it's drawing a selection. So click and let go. And then when you go back to the beginning, that circle that appears, that's similar to how the pen tool kind of operates. You get that closed path little icon coming up, click, and now it's created this shape that I've drawn. So if you have something with a lot of straight lines, this would be good. For that, you can draw whatever you like. And I'm clicking and going, I'm letting go of the mouse, which is nice. Whereas with the lasso tool, you have to click and hold the whole time. All right. For this, it's going to keep selecting stuff because I'm clicking. For this one, I'm going to use the quick selection tool. And this is a really popular selection tool. See how I've got this selected? I want to get rid of it. If you go to select, why won't it say deselect? Oh, at the top, it's at the top, deselect. And that will get rid of that so you can start again. Or the keyboard shortcut is Apple D or Control D for deselect. That's a handy shortcut to know. Quick select uses a bit of Photoshop's smarts in the way that it will try to help you out a bit. So I'm just clicked there and it's done circles. But if you click and drag, see how it just sort of snapped to the edge? This little marching ants shows the selection. It's gone to the edge of the image. I'll zoom in so you can see. So the quick select tries to help you out a bit and it goes, oh, do you want to select this bit? And because this image has a high contrast background, as in the white is really high contrast to the leaf, it will do that easily. If I had a green background on this or a color that was really similar to the leaf, it might have a hard time doing that. So that's why I suggested we start with this one. It's a really good example. So you can see here, I'm just clicking and dragging. It's same as the brush. You can also change, not there. You can change the size and the hardness. So you could make this bigger if you wanted to, or smaller for little areas. Sometimes, that's done a really good job. See how that's just selected all of the leaf that I want. If it accidentally selected part of this background, this white section, if you want to deselect something, I'm going to make this brush small with my keyboard shortcuts. If you hit the option, actually I'll make it bigger so you can see what I'm talking about. oh no, I'll zoom in. There's no change. Oh, it's so hard to see. Right in the middle of the brush at the moment, there's a plus, and that's why before, when I click and drag, it's adding to the selection, because the default for the quick select tool is plus. See up here it has a little plus sign. You can change it over here, change it to a minus, and then click or click and drag and it would remove sections from that selection, or leave it on the plus, hit the keyboard shortcut or the keyboard button option or alt, and that turns it into a minus. Oh, it actually changes up here. That's cool. So when I hit option, see how it goes? It flicks it to the minus, and then when I let go, it also shows it on the brush. There's a little minus in the middle. That's just selected or deselected part of it I want to keep, and that's because my brush is a bit big. So if I make my brush smaller, select this back again, I'm clicking and dragging, hold the option or alt, and then try and refine this a bit. Great, so I'm happy with that. So now I've got my object selected, I'm going to apply a layer mask to that. And what will happen is it's going to use the selection to create the layer mask. So I've got the background selected, obviously, because that's what I've been working on. You don't have to click on it because it's the only thing there, the only thing. Okay, click on layer mask. It'll create a layer mask and it will apply that selection. So you can see now it's removed that background, and on the layer mask you can see the black areas that it's put in were those selected bits. So this grey and white checkerboard indicates this is transparent. How handy. It's so handy that you can just make a selection and then apply the layer mask. So you don't need to apply the layer mask first and then do the brush tool and then like try and scrub out all this background. You can just select what you want to keep, then apply the layer mask, and it's super easy. You can also now edit this if you needed to or wanted to. So say if there was some like white edges here, I'm going to click on my brush tool, flick this to the white, flick it to the whites in the foreground. And then if I'm on the layer mask, see how the layer mask selected? That's adding that background back in. So if there are parts that didn't quite select properly, or you missed a bit, or something happened, or you want to just touch it up a bit, you can now adjust the layer mask. So if I want to remove this, I'm going to flick this so the black is in front. I'm on the brush tool. I've got a really high feather set to this. Let's up the hardness and remove that back out. So this is how we have been doing it so far, but you can also do it with the selection. Just hit the X so I can add this back in, hit the X again to remove this part. Cool, so what I'm going to do now is save this file. Just touching this up. Save this file. Oops. I'm going to put it in a new folder. Well, I'm just going to actually I'll just put it in my downloads folder. So I want to get it out of the resource images folder so I don't get confused. And I'm going to put clipped on the end of this. You could put background removed. Sometimes BG is used often as a shortcut for background, or like no BG. Whatever you can call this to just like distinct it. What word am I thinking of? Distinguish it from the original image. So put something in here that says something like, there's no background on this. And it's going to be a Photoshop file so that it will keep the transparency. A TIFF will also support transparency. It'll make it bigger though, the file size bigger. Not the image size, the file size. All right, save. Okay. I should know that, yes, once you start creating Photoshop files, they become big ones. So originally this image was 3.6 meg. And this is the one I've just taken the background out and made a Photoshop file. It's now 52.5 meg. So, you know, just a teensy bit bigger than we started with. And that's because it's trying to keep all this information. So just be aware of that. If there's something that you need to be aware of the size, Photoshop files get big. And so will, this was our background. It's 91 meg, and that was just with those 3 images we put in. We're about to make it bigger by adding this. So just so you know, like you're working on limited storage space, Photoshop is gonna chew it all up. Okie dokie. So I've gone back to my jungle file. I don't want to be in this folder. I'm going to put these in a separate area. So I'm just opening this back up so I can see it over the top. And then click and drag like we did before. Oops, good if I actually did it. Click and drag, that'll plonk your Monstera leaf on here. You can oops, I don't want to guide, I want to resize it. That was because I dragged from the ruler. That's how you bring a guide in. We haven't talked about guides much. Either way. I'm going to put it down here, rotate it around. Plonk it there, hit enter, and now we've got our image without the background in there. Oh, I didn't mask it very well. Yours will be better. Yours will be beautiful. Mine's got a bit of white on it. So I could go and tweak it in here, or I could actually tweak it here. So if I add a layer mask to this, zoom in, you can add a layer mask to these images that we've already removed the background if you want to. Because even if like there might be something you want to remove to suit your collage, or if you just want to like tweak the edges like I am, make that a bit smaller, swap my foreground color around, click and drag, and then I can remove that white area, or I can remove that whole leaf if I wanted to, like whatever you want to do. I'm gonna undo that. Yes, so that you can still edit this within this file. It will not change the original image though. It will not. It's only changing it in this file. Okay, so then you could do the same thing for the next, like another image, which I want to show you a different way to select things. So if you could open up this succulent, the Scott Webb succulent. So remember, I'm not going to click and drag it over there yet because we don't want it in this file. We want it separately. Right click. Really good if I could right click. And then Photoshop. Cool, so it's open separately. And the reason I'm doing this as separate files first is that's the workflow I prefer, because if there was a scenario where I wanted to use this clipped file for something else, or the client said, actually, can you just give us that Monstera leaf by itself? If I did it in this file originally, it kind of lives in this Photoshop file. Whereas when I do it separately, it's a whole separate file that I can use for other things or give to someone separately. There would be a way, if you did it in your Photoshop file, you can extract them out and do different things, but I just find this kind of handy to play with it by itself and then plonk it in here. You could do it within the Smart Object. There are options, guys. There's options. There's always a million ways to do the same thing. I'm just showing you this way. Okay, so let's look at this image. So we've talked about marquee tool, lasso tool, polygonal lasso tool, quick select. If you, oh, actually your quick select might have been hiding under here. It might have been the object select on top, in which case you would have had to right click or hold to get the quick select. Hopefully you figured that out. I'm sure you did. You're clever people. So now we're going to choose object selection tool, and this is where more of Photoshop's smarts come in. So I've selected the object tool in my toolbar, and now I'm going to roll over the image. I'm not even clicking anything, I'm just rolling over, and it's already kind of showing me, hey, I reckon that's an object, hence object selection. The background doesn't pick up, these little bits of dirt it's not going to pick up, and it depends on your image. If you had an image with a lot of objects in it, it would probably try and show you the different objects. So for this image, it works really well to just select the part that I want. If I click, ooh, don't crash. If I click, it'll put the selection around that object. Ooh, there we go. Okay, so now I get my marching ants around here. So some objects this will, so some images this will work really well. If I open up, maybe, where's the other cactus? Nope, not that one. This one. When I use the object tool on here, wait for it to catch up with me. Come on, Photoshop. Oh, it's having a moment. My laptop fan isn't doing too well either. Okay, now see how it's trying to pick up these parts of the cactus as separate objects? I think if you get to a certain point, it will do the whole thing, or maybe not. I thought there was a spot that it will try and do the whole thing. Anyway, see how that, if I click on that, it's just going to select that part. Oh, I'm really making Photoshop work on this old laptop either. Anyway, at TAFE, this would, and at beautiful new TAFE computers, this doesn't struggle at all. Yours might struggle at home too, like this. It's perfectly okay. Just be patient. Save your work in case it crashes. But anyway, the point is, see how that's just selecting that part. That just depends how Photoshop's going to interpret this. So object select looks like a really cool trick, a magic trick, but it's not going to work for everything. You could hold the shift and then click and it would add the selection. See, I've got that little add sign, plus sign. Oh, I'm going to close this, not do it. It's not going to be too happy. No, that's added that selection. So you could do that, or you could quick select. Like, just want to show you object select. It's really nifty in a lot of situations. So this magically just selected the part I wanted. If I apply the layer mask, it'll remove that background. You can see there's little parts that it didn't quite select. You could go in with the brush tool and fix those up. So if I save this, you'll fix them up. I'm just quickly going to do this so I can show you. I'm sure this video is already 20,000 hours long, as they all tend to be. Cool, going to save that. It's a Photoshop file. Go back to your background, click and drag. I would suggest making a folder to put these in, not just loose like I've got them. Oh, that didn't do it. Excuse me, Photoshop. There we go. I'm on a trackpad. It's awkward. I'm sorry. Okay, click and drag. Oh, excuse me. And now this has plonked this in. Now you can resize it, do whatever you want to do, hit enter. Happy days. The other thing you can do is if you want to duplicate a layer, you can click and drag the layer you want to copy into this plus sign or into the new layer sign. That will duplicate it. See that? Now it says copy. Or you can, and that's just put it right on top. So if I move this, oh, it's not going to move it because I'm on object select. Try and get my move tool selected. Now Photoshop's going to use all its power to try and object select that. Come on, you can do it. I can't even close these while it's spinning wheeling me. Okay, now we're okay. Just deselect that part. I've got the move tool selected. Oh, it's being laggy. She being laggy. There we go. And then I can go into like image, edit, free transform. I can resize this, move this, do whatever I want, and then you can have two of the same thing. And then same as always, you can rearrange them, move these around with the move tool. I've just clicked on this one, so it selected that layer. You can move this, whatever you want to do. So just create your own little jungle collage. Use as many images as you like. Remember to save your file as you go. Oh, actually, I forgot. I'm going to make a group. I'm going to call this one plants. Wow, so distinctive. You can call it whatever you like. You call it objects, plants on top, clipped plants, something like that. Selecting everything, dragging it into that folder, and that way I can have plants, backgrounds separate, and then you can turn them on and off. It makes it a little bit easier to work on. And then you can extend these out to work on them. You can see all your background layers. And that's it. So have some fun creating a jungle. If you want to add different images that aren't in the photo, you can do that. Just check the resolution looks okay. And when you're done, just save your PSD. Put your name in it. And that's it. Have fun. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.